Hello.
You're repping Penn State. Should have had a big
Yeah.
Terps day.
Nope. All right. Let's go ahead and share screen.
There we go.
All right. Let's see if this works. Good.
That is good. Are you going to go full screen with it?
It is full screen.
Not for me. It's
You
not.
double click the little square. Like double click the little box that has the presentation in it on your screen.
Oh, and then we drop down.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
So we can just remind people to do that. Yeah, so that's it. I'm just driving on my second monitor.
I like this hop-in setup.
Yeah, it's good.
I think with the DRC, I'm going to try to get them to do it. We did Zoom last night, and it was fine, but there's a lot of room for improvement over gathering a whole bunch of people in Zoom.
Right. So I don't know. I guess if people are watching, they can see what we're doing. Don't have to log in. So I think even if we're presenting, as long as people are watching, I think it's okay. They don't have to actually log in, I think.
Yeah, let's give them a few minutes.
Yeah.
This session just opened up. I had to click around a little bit to find it.
Yeah. It only, I guess, 5 minutes before it started. Okay. Hi, Hannah. All right, we'll give everybody a few minutes to jump in before we get started, given it is the first session of the day. Folks are probably still finding their way around the hop-in tool. If Deb and Val and Celine and the ETC team are on, thank you guys for coordinating and putting this on today. We're honored to be a part of it and to be the first presentation of the day. We'll get started here at about 9:05, so we'll give folks 4 more minutes and then we'll dive into our presentation.
Sounds good.
I kind of feel like the guinea pig of the event too, being the first one. Work out all the kinks.
There you go.
And Dan, I think you're going to be managing the chat here as folks hop on. Thanks, Deb. Dandy. That is our combined name, Dan and Andy.
Heard that one before.
Yeah, Deb, we'll work out all the kinks for you. We'll let you know if there's anything before you jump in.
I do love the hop-in solution though. This whole platform is just step above Zoom for sure.
Let's see here. See if I can. We'll wait 2 more minutes here for folks to continue to file in, as we would say if we were here in person.
Henry's funny. Celine and Deb, celeb.
Try and get the glare out of my glasses here. I don't think I'm going to be successful. There we go. All right, thank you everybody who's jumped in. We're gonna get started here in 1 minute. Give everybody just another few seconds to join the session. Looks like we've got 33 people on board already.
It's good for a Friday morning. I like it.
That is good. It's nice when you can, keep your pajamas on and at the very least have sweatpants on.
Is that what you're doing?
I
Do
did
you have a
put
collared shirt on?
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I didn't do that for some meetings, but no, today I actually have real pants on. So, and we'll do a little plug here. 4:30 today, the Technically Awards, followed by happy hour trivia. I will be hosting that trivia session. Should be fun. Got some good innovation, inventor, Baltimore mixed bag types of questions. So grab a beer, grab a mixed drink, grab some wine, whatever it is that you choose to enjoy, and we'll have some fun. It's for anybody that's on here, it's a Google form. You'll get to fill out the answers, submit it. You'll get your results right away, right on the screen. So it'll be a lot of fun. And Deb, the wine is already open for you. I am not surprised.
It's gonna be a fun day.
That is the best way to enjoy a virtual event. All right, everybody. It's about 5 after. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the first session. My name is Andy Locke. I'm joined by Dan Dawes. We are with Response Labs. Today, we're talking about CRM marketing during COVID-19 and keeping customers engaged throughout the pandemic. So we'll start off with giving you a little bit of a background of who Response Labs is. So Dan, do you want to go ahead and take the reins?
Certainly. Thanks, Andy. First off, thanks everybody for coming. I know it's tough to break away from all of the other kind of Zoom virtual meetings that you have, but Baltimore Innovation Week, it's an important time. We had to compress it to this day, which is chock full of all kinds of great sessions. So make sure to take a look at the agenda and get signed up for other ones. We've got some great stuff to cover today, though. Response Labs, the digital CRM marketing agency. We are a small marketing agency with offices in Baltimore and Seattle, and we focus on CRM and loyalty programs and supporting those loyalty programs. We specialize in enterprise level email, SMS, and push communications, personalized and at scale. So we put together communications programs that help loyalty based on past purchase behavior, predictive analytics, what we think consumers are going to buy based on what we've seen in the data. And our purpose through all of this is to make every message matter, whether it's email, SMS, push, web notifications. All of those things have an important play in the overall communication strategy. And we look at that through a data-driven lens throughout. Andy and I, we've been working together for many years. We go back to Congruent Media. Back in the day, we worked at Havas for a chapter of our advertising life. And Andy's now a partner and managing director of Response Labs.
Cool. And you got a few shots of the team here as well through various volunteer events at home, on the boat, which is, I think, where Dan would prefer to be most days.
All right. Next slide, please. So the team at Response Labs has a lot of experience with a lot of brands that you've heard about, maybe some you haven't heard about, and a lot of different industries. Under Armour, that's a local favorite. We worked with them early on, developed some behind the scenes content management systems that may be still in play today. Sony PlayStation, Chase Bank, if you have a Chase credit card and you went through their online application process, we had a say in how all of that works. Liberty Mutual, Blue Bunny, Invisalign, some big names. Now, our team's experience, we really focus on the CRM and loyalty side of things. We are Salesforce certified partners. We have a lot of different certifications on the Salesforce platform. We're thick in Cheetah Digital, Marketo, as well as other platforms out there. Today, we're going to talk about a few of these brands. Next slide, please. The Ahold Delhaize brands. Ahold Delhaize is a large multinational conglomerate of grocery store brands. Today, we're going to go over Peapod, Food Lion, Hannaford, Giant. Whoop, jumped up there a little quick, but Giant, Stop and Shop. And we're also going to talk about Outback Steakhouse. Next slide. Next, there we go. So on the Ahold Delhaize side of things, we became their CRM and loyalty marketing partner back in 2015. It didn't start though with that deep type of partnership. It started with the door being opened where a large advertising agency needed help kind of below the line. They needed an email template developed that was mobile responsive, could reach all of the different inboxes, and made it through spam traps and all of those type of things. We certainly helped with that. Everybody liked the type of work that we did, and we were able to expand that quarter over quarter, year over year. And now we're in the fortunate position to oversee all things Salesforce Marketing Cloud. In the process, over the last 5 years or so, we've launched or relaunched 5 loyalty rewards programs and completed 3 migrations at the enterprise level for Salesforce Marketing Clouds for the different business units. Now, Outback Steakhouse, we are their CRM and loyalty marketing partner since early last year. That relationship was opened up from the CMO of Outback, Danielle Vona, who was the CMO of Sonic Drive-In for a number of years, back when Andy and I and the rest of the Response Labs team headed up digital for Sonic. For them, we did all things digital, including all of the data that was underneath the app, all of the transactional data, putting together the loyalty points program support. We did a ton of work there. After Danielle moved on to Bloomin' Brands and eventually became the CMO of Outback, they identified that they needed help with their email marketing and specifically the data side of things. There's a ton of data that Outback gets from point of sale, different supply chain partners, all of those type of things. And they needed help organizing that data and turning it into marketable, actionable plans. So in 2020, this year, we implemented data modeling to help drive segmentation. And we also launched an SMS program this year. Andy's going to go into more detail about how all of these things came to play and how they help support these brands during COVID-19.
Great. Thank you, Dan. So today's presentation, we're going to touch on five areas. First, we're going to talk about the 2 industries. We're fortunate to have this sort of overarching view of both of these clients and both of their industries. We're working in grocery and restaurant casual dining. We're going to talk a little bit about the similarities and differences between those 2 industries at the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll go through some of the challenges each of the industries had, focusing on some key areas and how those changes affected the consumer behavior and ultimately how the business and our team responded with CRM. We'll finish up at where we are presently today and review some of the key takeaways from today's presentation. So the first thing, a tale of 2 industries. What we have is one industry that, when the pandemic hit, was an essential business, And everybody, probably most of you, flock to the supermarket, the grocery store, to get your toilet paper, your hand sanitizer, your canned food, basically everything you needed to hunker down because nobody knew what was going on. Once that shutdown happened, the grocery industry was able to essentially, make out pretty well from a financial standpoint within that first month of the pandemic. On the flip side, on the restaurant casual dining area, it was the opposite. Once everything hit with the pandemic, things closed, that industry dropped drastically. It varied by region. Some regions shut down a lot sooner than others. And those that were able to remain open weren't hit as hard. But ultimately, what we have here are two different reactions and two different effects of the pandemic. And us, in our role with clients in both of those industries, we're put in an interesting position for how to manage that. So we'll start with grocery and get into a little bit about sort of how things played out beginning in March with that industry. The first thing are the challenges that were faced with the pandemic hitting. The first note about the grocery industry is it was deemed essential. And this meant it would stay open and its employees had to remain there. So for our client, while we work on the marketing side, there was still a lot of communication, a lot of news and information out there about just how the employees themselves were going to be safe as people were literally flocking and waiting in line. And again, I think I'm speaking to a lot of things that folks on this presentation experience. I know I did, standing in line for the grocery store, wearing a mask. Again, the unknown of what's going on. So that was a huge challenge for them. With much of the direction we were getting coming from the marketing team, a lot of that was being driven by executive leadership who were overseeing a lot of these different issues. Supply chain was another big challenge for them. Things like toilet paper, hand sanitizer, meats. There's a variety of other products that were just getting picked up on the whole and leaving shelves empty, like you see in the image here from a Stop and Shop. So supply chain and being able to keep up with that demand was a huge issue for them to challenge. Staffing, we mentioned about the employee and customer safety, just having enough employees there, those that were calling out, those that were getting sick with COVID, keeping that going. So those are a huge challenge. And lastly, the e-commerce infrastructure. So it's unique. The grocery stores as a whole had to adapt quickly. And we'll talk a little bit about adapting quickly in the next couple slides. Those that already had a really strong infrastructure, and we were fortunate to be working with one of them, Ahold Delhaize, and the banners that Dan mentioned earlier, Giant Foods, Giant out of Pennsylvania, Stop and Shop, Hannaford, Food Lion, they all leaned on the Peapod e-commerce system. That has since been absorbed into each individual grocery store, but at that point in time, we were actually working with those teams to stand up the e-commerce on the back of Peapod. So a lot of the needs of the business were actually already in place. So that put a group like Ahold Delhaize and those grocery chains in a really good spot. It didn't prevent them from handling and dealing with certain issues, but it did make it easier for them to adapt a little quicker. And as you can see, Ahold Delhaize saw their comparable sales jump 34% in March, which was a huge jump across the board in the U.S. Now that led, of course, to a difference in the customer and the consumer. Safety was definitely, for most people, number one. I think there's still a good then and now that aren't as concerned about the safety. But generally speaking, especially in March when things hit, what was safe? What wasn't safe? I mean, people were bringing home, washing all their bags and everything, wiping it down with Clorox wipes and making sure all the vegetables were clean. Eventually, we learned that wasn't as necessary, but at the time, that was a huge issue. And that just causes a lot of strain on the customer and their shopping experience and what you need to do to be able to continue your marketing. As we spoke with a lot of clients here and in other industries outside of restaurant as well. The key thing we talked about is that business was not stopping for the most part. People still needed to eat. We have some construction association groups. Businesses still needed to run. Associations still needed to communicate with their members. Even construction on homes, while it might have taken a little pause, those projects ramped up. People still needed to have things fixed. Water heaters broke, heating broke. So our perspective on the whole pandemic from a lot of our clients was Business still needed to continue. If there was ever a time to lean into your consumers and reach out to them and communicate with them, this was the time. All the preparation you have in building up your audiences and building up your followers and building up your loyalists, this is the time to cash in and get the most out of that work that you put in. So when we were speaking with Ahold Delhaize and working with them, it was really about clear communication, effective communication, and frequent communication with their consumers as those consumers were trying to figure out how to manage this. There's also a huge divide in the unexpected result of these changes that were put in motion. For example, the monthly grocery bill went up to $525 in March, which was up 30% over the previous year. So again, I could speak from I went back and looked at the budget in March. Everything spiked in terms of grocery because we got 3 kids and we didn't know what was going on, so we stocked up as much as we could. Especially every time I went to the grocery store, it was a 3-hour adventure of waiting in line. So we made sure we got what we needed. So again, I'm speaking, probably a lot of you had the same experience. So as a business trying to talk to us, what could they do? How could they do it? Trusting people picking the food, and obviously the expansion of ordering groceries online. And finally, the expectations versus what reality was. You have somebody else picking your tomatoes. It might not be the way that you would have picked them. So with Ahold Delhaize and the brands that we work with, we led in with our purpose, which is really what drives Response Labs, and that's make every message matter. How can we make sure that we're doing everything we possibly can at each step of the journey for customers going through this, that everything that we're communicating with them has value and purpose to ultimately get them to the end. The customer, they want their groceries. They also don't want to get sick. The stores themselves, they want to sell the groceries. They don't want to get anybody sick. So there's very clear, big time objectives that we have to make sure we're communicating. So these 3 areas, and we'll repeat these as well for the restaurant industry, are key for what we're talking about today. Being able to adapt quickly, being able to target your messaging, and being able to learn fast and really circle back and adapt quickly again. So when we're talking about leading with CRM, these are the 3 key areas that we led with this particular business. So the first area is adapting quickly. Our team, and I know a couple of them are on the call here. I'll specifically call out Jen Aldinger, Hannah Butler, Tim Hart, and Jeffrey Rudolph. They lead the core of our Ahold Delhaize team. And about a year and a half, 2 years ago, we underwent a huge migration project where Ahold USA and Delhaize North America, they merged together to create Ahold Delhaize. That brought Giant Foods, Giant Martin's, Stop and Shop, and Peapod into the mix with Hannaford and Food Lion. A huge merger and a huge mix of different teams that we were in charge of overseeing when it came to the production of email, SMS, and push messaging. Jen, our director of client service, led that project in organizing the process and the planning of getting email communications going out. To give you an idea of how many emails and what that level of effort is, year to date in 2020, we have deployed 444 million emails across all of these banners. 444 million emails. That is a lot of email. And so I talk about the setup and the process and the planning because it was because of that organized structure that we were able to implement using a combination of Smartsheet and Jira and planning and intake forms, a lot of the stuff that might sound like a lot of extra work, but it was so key in us being able to adapt quickly. So if you're working on CRM, either on the brand or on the agency side, having that organization at the start is really, really important. Nobody anticipated a pandemic like this happening, but we were ready for it because of that implementation we had very early on. When the pandemic actually did hit, we had to step back and reassess the entire process, even though it was in place, reducing redundancy. So we in an ideal state, had a 6-week turnaround from planning communications, getting creative and put together. We have very targeted messaging that goes out, literally, lines of individual products each week that go to individual consumers based on their purchasing behavior. All of that had to be condensed down, and we had to kind of find the key areas to cut back on. Long days, late nights. March and April were pretty crazy for a lot of our team and our clients' team as well. But again, it was leaning on that process that really helped, and our ability to then adapt quickly to those changing orders, where we were getting messages coming down from the top of the executive stakeholders, informing customers and getting them up to speed on what's going on. Flawless execution. We typically are pretty, realistic when it comes to mistakes, and something here, something there. It happens. We have a lot of things in place to do it. It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. In this case, it was really important that we did not have mistakes. The flawless execution, the type of information we were communicating to consumers, we talked about kind of easing their fears and easing their concerns about what's going on. They didn't want to have to worry about groceries. So we had to make sure that communication going out did not have any misinformation, that the wrong people weren't getting it. So that flawless execution, and kudos to our team, Jeffrey, Jen, Tim, Hannah. It was really, really key for them to be able to execute the way that they did and to get through this. And ultimately, it forged stronger bonds, between us, our team, and also with our clients. We work directly with each of these banners. So there's different personalities up and down the East Coast. Hannaford is a completely different type of grocery store than Giant Foods or Stop and Shop. Food Lion is a completely different type of model than Hannaford. So understanding those different personalities, those goals, different executives driving it allowed a lot of us to build a stronger bond. So from our perspective, our own CRM was at work as well as a company. The next key thing was the targeted messaging. I talked about offers and different products. Basically, think of the physical circular you get in the mail, bringing that to life in email. That was just part of it. One of the key things that our team brought to the table for the Ahold Delhaize brands was identifying an opportunity very early on in the pandemic. Everybody was talking about grocery. Everybody was talking about going to the grocery store. There was a lot of interest in grocery. So emails about grocery were open pretty readily. And typically the way that we manage email is we implement suppressions for unengaged subscribers. So if a subscriber, for example, hasn't opened or clicked an email in 6 months, they go into a special suppression list. Basically, we don't want to consistently send emails, especially at the volume we're talking about. Remember, 444 million emails. When we send at that volume, there's a good chunk of people that don't engage. Not because they're not customers. They might engage in different channels like text or push, or just they're not digital. But we have their email, and we don't want to necessarily send to them if they're not going to open and click. So we have a whole process whereby we suppress. And typically it's at a 6-month window. If you don't open or click in 6 months, we suppress you. When we started to see the engagement levels spike for our regular engaged subscribers, we saw an opportunity. Our team proposed expanding that suppression. So instead of a 6-month suppression, we extended to a 9-month suppression, meaning that customers that hadn't engaged between months 6 and 9 since their last engagement, we actually started to send them email. It's a little bit of a risk, because if you get a lot of unengaged emails that go into inboxes and don't get touched, you can hurt your inbox placement, which then can ultimately lead to blacklisting, which for, again, a client this size, don't want to do that. But it was a calculated risk. We put it out there. And typically when we do a lapse type communication, we might see 3, 4, 5% engagement of bringing people back. We saw a 20% open rate. That's 20% of that unengaged audience who hadn't done anything in the last 9 months re-engaging. Huge win. Huge win for our team and identifying that, and a huge win for the client and getting their message out to 20% more to that audience after that 20% rate. So those people went back into the regular email stream for the foreseeable future. And that expansion kept going for a couple months. And then as things started to settle down, we put back the 6-month suppression for some of the banners. The geo-targeted COVID information was huge, especially as certain stores were closing, certain stores were reopening. We had to make sure that information was targeted. And again, handling all that information, our team, it's a lot of juggling. And having that infrastructure and that process made it really important and really key for us to be successful there. E-commerce promotions to non-digital customers. There were a handful of programs where we were targeting typical shoppers that would only go into the store. They never shopped online. And we focused on them, we hit them, and we saw, I believe it was between 10 to 15% of people with each iteration of that communication coming in and trying the digital for the first time. And that actually increased too as we really started to embrace a lot more of the digital promotions. Real-time communications as things were out of stock, and of course identifying the right channel. We engaged not only just in email but also SMS and push. And we've done studies in the past. We saw, for example, a test of reminders. We used to send. We were sending customers reminders that they had rewards sitting. We did it with email. People weren't engaging with the email, weren't engaging with the email, but they were shopping. So we said, okay, well, how many of those folks are getting SMS? We hit them with an SMS reminder, 74% increase. They just weren't opening their email. Maybe they were using it as an awareness. We don't know, but SMS, they engaged. So making sure you're finding the right channel was really key during this time of the pandemic. And here's an example of some of the communications that we're putting out there for these different banners. It's a lot of custom information. It's a lot of targeted information. And again, it's a lot of very pertinent, relative, time-sensitive information as well. So we're fortunate to be able to work with a group like we are with Ahold Delhaize and within an industry like grocery, and be able to experience all this type of information during the pandemic was, again, very enriching for our team in terms of their overall career experience as well. Lastly, it's learning fast. As I mentioned, most of the e-commerce for the Ahold Delhaize was built on the back of Peapod, and many of you might be familiar with Peapod out of Chicago, acquired by Ahold USA, merged with Ahold Delhaize, and it's now integrated into each of the individual grocery stores. Giant Foods, Stop and Shop, Giant, they all have e-commerce built into their own site right now, built on the backs of Peapod. So having that already in place was huge, but getting that really built in and fast-tracked into their iterative testing was also key. And we were able to do that quickly, and we've actually been ramping up that in the last quarter. I think September, the team is probably nodding as well. We probably had our busiest month all year in the month of September, implementing, planning, and reporting on new e-commerce driven programs. And that's going to continue through Q4 and into next year. We're already planning out new testing and initiatives from welcome onboarding, lapse communications. B2B is a huge one. As offices start to reopen, a lot of offices were using things like Giant Food to supply food for meetings, for stocking pantries. As those offices are reopening, we're building in a whole program around B2B communication. So that's really key as related to COVID. And then also preparation for future shutdowns. If this happens again, where another wave hits the US, we have to be ready. And now with our team having going through this, and the Ahold Delhaize marketing and higher up team going through this, we feel very prepared and very ready for should we have to go through the process again. And as I mentioned, 444 million emails, more emails coming, as well as more SMS and more push. The communications are going out. And it's not just more email in terms of volume, it's more targeted email. So you might not be getting more email, but as a whole, we're doing different iterations of email. So we're getting the right message to the right customer. So that's grocery, a boon. They're sitting on piles of money at some point because of just how much people needed that essential business to be there for them and to utilize. So that's the grocery industry, and we saw that chart earlier. The restaurant industry, on the other hand, a little bit different. Their challenges, some the same, but some very different. Closures, loss of business, unemployment, those that do reopen, how to reopen, limitations in the dining rooms. One of the big issues right now, as it's getting colder, and while the restaurants have reopened, is outdoor seating in the Northeast and the Midwest. It's getting cold. Outdoor seating. I read something the other day that propane sales are skyrocketing as everybody's getting the propane heaters for their outdoor seating. These are real challenges for businesses. The staffing levels are only at 71% of what they were, according to some recent surveys from the NRA, the National Restaurant Association. The industry is on track to lose $240 billion in sales by the end of the year. That is just, it's insurmountable. And for some businesses, it's going to be insurmountable. Already 100,000 closures have been tied to the pandemic. Businesses, restaurants are going out of business left and right, and it's only going to get worse as the PPP funding is drying up, and if there's not a new stimulus package, it's gonna make things a lot more challenging for those in the food and beverage industry. However, consumers are still eating, and while grocery has been picking up and people are making more food at home, we're starting to see things, as reopening started to begin in June and restaurants start to open up, and some getting more creative than others. Things are returning, I would not say to normal, but it would be to closer to normal, or the new normal as possible, where restaurants are opening, restaurants are making food for people on demand, and people are consuming that food. Now, what we're seeing though is they're not dining out as restaurants as nearly as much. We're seeing actually orders, and I have this in there about more weekday ordering, are up 12% on weekdays. It's almost like there is no weekend for some areas, because people are leaning in more to takeout. More folks are staying local and staying convenient. This hurts some of the restaurants, maybe some of the smaller restaurants that people might make as a destination. They aren't going to them as much. Using mobile more, and obviously e-commerce is huge. And similar to the grocery industry, those restaurants and a lot of the big box ones, the bigger corporate run ones, they benefit from this. And that's having a really strong e-commerce, digital, mobile, and to-go and delivery infrastructure. And we're fortunate that we work with one of them in Outback and Bloomin' Brands, in having their digital infrastructure at a really good place, and their to-go and delivery, they were already ramping up. They were already had a plan for ramping up and leaning more into that in 2020 and into 2021. It just happened a lot faster than they had initially planned, but they had a lot of the pieces in place. So for them, it allowed them to adapt a little bit better as well. And lastly, expectations versus reality. I don't know if you've any fried food that tastes great and looks great when you're sitting at a restaurant on the table and they bring it right out of the fryer. It's a little bit different when it's coming home in a pre-packed package and it's absorbed a lot of the moisture. That's the reality of some of these industries. Some can adapt a little bit better to that, some aren't, but having that communication with consumers and their expectations versus reality is really key as well. And all those things, again, a consumer that's unsure of what's happening, especially back in March and April, that's where CRM comes in. And that's where our team leaned in a little bit back in the summer, and we started to do some of our own studies and our own research that helped inform some of the marketing that we put in place for Outback Steakhouse. We did a series of surveys. We looked at to-go, we looked at takeout. That's where we zeroed in. Customers were doing more to support local. They were less likely to drive far. It was interesting. We actually did some studies about how long people thought the pandemic was going to last. We saw anywhere from like 3 to 6 months, and then it's back to normal. We ran the study again another month later, and they're like, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half. We're not sure yet. So it was interesting to see those studies. One of the studies we did, though, was right after restaurants began reopening. We did a survey. We did it through SurveyMonkey. I think we tested, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about 1,500 survey participants.
Yes.
And we asked them if they had dined out within the last 30 days out at a restaurant. And then we asked a series of questions about their opinions and behaviors after the fact, within going back to visit a restaurant, their feelings on COVID, what they thought. And it was a very stark contrast between the type of customer that was willing to go out to a restaurant right away versus those that were choosing to wait. Again, these are people who did go out and dine. So this is not people who are hunkered. So these people did venture out within the first couple of weeks of reopening. But the difference between those that went out early and those that waited, and their future behavior, it was pretty interesting. And why that was important, and why we wanted to take that to our customers, was we have the ability to take that transactional information, plug it into different segments, and actually target our messaging. So for example, how likely are you to dine out again in the next 30 days? Those that arrived right after a restaurant reopening were like, yeah, immediately. We don't have an issue. Those that waited were like, you know what, we're good. We're going to just continue to wait it out. We tried it, wasn't quite our cup of tea. We're going to continue to wait it out. We're probably not likely to go out again. We also asked about their feelings on COVID, and those that, again, you can assume that this is what people felt, but we had the data to sort of back it up. Those that dined immediately, they didn't really care too much about COVID. They understood for the most part that it was important to wear masks and to socially distance, but it wasn't going to stop them from living their life. Agree with it or not, this is what people were telling us. And these people were customers of our clients. Those that waited, they very much were cautious. They very much wanted to wait. So the way that we were able to propose this to our client and give you sort of an example of the type of targeted messaging that comes with making every message matter was we looked at transaction history. We said, okay, we know when stores were reopening. Within a time frame, within a week of reopening, those customers that transacted, let's lead with product, promotion, and experience. However, those that came and dined with you within the first couple of weeks that are really cautious about COVID, let's lead with cleanliness,
Right.
safety, the measures that the restaurants are taking as the dining rooms are opening up. Same email, same promotion of this steak, bloomin' onion, but what we led with was different, and we saw a marketed difference in that messaging. I believe that the open rates for each group were at least 10 to 15% higher than what we typically saw if we would have sent the message completely. So that was a great way that we were able to take that into effect. I give you that example as adapting quickly. Our team, again, adapting quickly, targeting messaging, and learning fast. Our engagement with Outback is a little bit different. While we're sending 444 million emails in 2020 with Ahold Delhaize in the grocery industry, and it's ramping up fast, we were brought in as consulting partners for Outback. So we were coming in with more of a surgical approach to their communication. So our adapting quickly was more about changing perspective. The first thing was converting all CTAs to online ordering and targeting those audiences. So now it's not go visit your Outback, go check out the menu, whereas email was sort of more of an awareness driver. Once COVID hit, email was the transactional driver. And we always were sending online order messaging and testing that. And we even won an award for 2019 for sending messages to folks for take home for the email creative we did, making them a dinner hero and really focusing on the working mom and working dad and doing it. That messaging worked. That resonated for online ordering. Now we're in a pandemic and everybody's has to order online if they want to dine out. So converting all those CTAs to online ordering was a real change in perspective to how we approach email for a brand that previously have relied more on awareness driving communications and promotion driving communications to get people into a restaurant. The second thing was we had put together a data modeling strategy for Outback. We use the RFM model. For those that aren't familiar, RFM leans on recency, frequency, and the monetary total spend of customers as three key data points over a time frame. For them, it was 2 years of transactional data. And we use that to basically chop up customers into a group of segments that allows us to target messaging better based on their actual transactional and spend behavior. How valuable is a customer based on their frequency, based on how recently they were dining, and how much they're spending overall. And we employed this model. And I should say, we're actually going to dig really deeper. This slide is just one slide. We have a whole presentation coming up in November in partnership with the American Marketing Association of Baltimore, where we're actually going to dive into the RFM work that we did, along with Danielle Vona, the CMO of Outback Steakhouse. The promotion for that event hasn't gone out yet, but it will be in the next week or so. So if you're interested in this type of data modeling within a CRM program or a loyalty program and want more information about what we've been able to do with Outback, we'll be speaking in November 10th, I believe it is, on that topic. But this slide just gives you sort of an overview on what we were able to do for Outback. Now, with the pandemic, we had to change the perspective.
Right.
The 2 years worth of data was great. We were able to see where customers were at a certain point. But now between March, April, June, July, their behavior changed. Their frequency changed. How they were ordering changed. Their spending changed as they went to online. So we had to sort of we had to adapt quickly to how we were going to use this information. And it worked out well. We were able to take the information we had about the type of diner. So we call them the champions, the loyalists. We know who they were. We know who was an Outback customer. And then we know who had not been dining in the last 3 months. And that was unusual for a champion or a loyalist, their top loyalty customers. So we took a look at that data, at those customers, and then we cross-referenced that with who has ever actually tried online ordering before. And we put a 2-year window. So anybody who has ordered online or has not ordered online ever in the last 2 years, who's in this champion loyalty group, why? Why haven't they ordered online? What can we do to get them to transact? Because we know they love Outback. We know they're loyal. What can we do? So what we did was we put together a communication that listed out the steps to online ordering. Our hypothesis was this might be an older crowd. This might be maybe a non-technical crowd. Maybe they're just a little bit afraid of the nuance of going online and actually putting in their credit card and ordering. So we boiled down the process of online ordering, and we put it out there, and we saw conversions. I think it was, and I'm being modest here, for people who hadn't ordered online, we had I think it was about a 2% conversion rate. Doesn't sound like a lot, but remember, these people had never done this before, and the ones that did end up ordering spent $10 more on average than what we saw in other communications to similar to other customers. Similar
percentage
messaging.
lift.
Big percentage lift. And it was actually not only $10 more than that, but it was about I think it was $12 to $13 more than the average for the regular customer. So these are huge numbers. These were big for the client. These are bottom line moving type of numbers. We take that, we extrapolate it out, and we start to test against these other segments within the RFM modeling. So we have in the middle, we have potential loyalists, people who had dined maybe within the last 6 months, who had spent a little bit more than average. Those that aren't that haven't dined back with Outback, and they should be within that 6 month frame, hit them with the steps message. Maybe they also are a little bit hesitant to order online from Outback. Maybe they're afraid their bloomin' onion is going to be soggy. Let's hit them head on with that messaging and tell them it's not. The type of packaging, the type of communication, the type of contactless ordering for anybody that's concerned about COVID. So we put those messages out there. We were also able to geo-target some of those messages, and we were able to really help improve the value of not only email communications as a whole, but the value of the data that the client, in this case Outback, was collecting through their Dine Rewards loyalty program. And we actually just had a meeting on Wednesday with the entire marketing team for Outback, where we presented where we were with the RFM study. We've executed 4 campaigns in the last 6 weeks, all built on the back of the RFM segmentation data, and all built with COVID behavior and pandemic behavior informed in the messaging. And so this is just some examples of the work where we're able to target and implement a message. Actually, I cut off the COVID call outs here, but there is a message on each of these emails that talks about the safety measures. And that was a lot of what we were putting out there to the client early on, was just getting out in front of that. But this is an example of some of the testing we did. The let's see what's new, let's catch up tonight. That was a test of product versus experience. And what we saw was very interesting. We saw experience, people wanting to get back out, people wanting to experience dining out with other people. That performed better at driving conversions, and the messaging in the subject line performed better at opening the email. Now the food performed better in clicks. People like to click on the food. They see that bloomin' chicken or that filet. They're like, yes, I want that. That drove click behavior, but it didn't get them to convert as much. So it was a really interesting test to look at experience and conversion at the online ordering thing, and we literally are fleshing that out. I mean, that was a week and a half ago we sent that email. So we're iterating, we're learning quickly. And also with the dynamic pods in the emails, we're able to target key messaging based on their RFM segment. We could have the same try something new message with a different headline based on whether you're a champion, whether you're a loyalist, whether you're dormant, whatever it is. And we're able to do that on the fly and get learnings immediately from sending that email. So learning fast, again, the third kind of component here is really important when we're taking CRM during regular times, let alone this pandemic time. So leading with CRM for Outback, establishing the monthly benchmarks for customer segments, that shifting that for the pandemic point of view. The COVID area dining is variable in audience segments. We talked about that with the research that we did, being able to take that information and feed it into the communications, and then implementing the quick hit messaging and testing and weekly deployments, which we saw. All of these things are in play now for Outback Steakhouse and their email communications, and also their SMS that they recently launched. So we're learning fast, and we're able to take those learnings back to the client to help them improve the business. So how has restaurant improved or hasn't improved? And how has grocery improved or hasn't improved? Let's take a look at where they are today. So this is where I showed you earlier. This is where they were in March and April. Grocery going up, restaurants going down. Our job, take the CRM practices, make every message matter, get in there and talk to customers directly. Well, this is what we've seen. Each industry has leveled out a bit. Grocery has come back to less skyrocketing, less, crazed things, but they're performing still above where they were pre-COVID in terms of as an industry, which is great, which is huge. Restaurants, not quite back to where they were. And it depends on region. It depends, again, the bigger box restaurants, certainly some are performing better. I know Ruby Tuesday just filed for bankruptcy and some other ones are. I don't know the specific reasons why some of those ones are not succeeding versus others are. I can tell you that at Bloomin' Brands, they've got a really great digital strategy, all the way through the company. The way that they're integrating, they partnership with DoorDash, the way that they're operationalizing delivery and to go, and the infrastructure on the digital platforms and the advancements and improvements they're making. I know for them, that is huge for why they are succeeding at the level they are. But as a whole, the restaurant industry for the big box ones are driving a lot of this increase back a little bit. We'll call it getting closer to normalcy. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is a lot more of the smaller restaurants, the more independent restaurants. Those are the ones that are really, suffering the worst, the most from this. And I think it's across other industries as well. Independent grocery stores are hurting. Independent agencies, independent businesses that some of you are on have been feeling the effects. So that, sometimes those bigger companies, the bigger resources, and being able to use those resources, does tend to help shelter a little bit from this. Not all, but some, and being well planned, being well organized certainly helped here. So this chart really does tell a story for sure. So for each of our clients, where are they today? Ahold Delhaize had an incredibly successful Q2. All of their retail brands generate double-digit comp sales growth in the second quarter. The third quarter earnings are coming out within the next couple of weeks. I'm going to assume that they're still all up for all the different businesses. Globally for Ahold Delhaize, they're a global company, but also for the U.S. brands that we work with, we haven't seen any sign of that slowing down at all. On the restaurant side, the perspective is a little bit different. For an FSR magazine, they reported that Outback same-store sales stayed under negative 13.6% every week since the end of May. That's yes, it's negative, but it's less negative than it would have been had they not seen some of the uptick back with stores reopening. So what we're seeing with our clients and us being a part of that is improvement, adjustment, and using the resources they have for targeting. Dan, you want to chime in on the present day here as well?
I think you covered a lot of it great. I mean, it's both from a high level perspective, it's both sides, right? We're the agency, they're the client, and they had to pivot. And both of these clients, they're enterprise level clients. They're big. There are a lot of players at the table. They had to address the pandemic. They had to address the very rapid changes in the marketplace and be able to operationalize the messaging. Which is where we come in to that. The fact that they both made their pivots so quickly and had a plan prior to for the changes that were coming, because they had that plan, they could adapt that much quicker. And I think that's really the key takeaway in both of these success stories, is that they had a plan, they were able to identify and pivot, and they were able to operationalize it quickly. At the enterprise level, that's a big win. The independence that you were talking about, I think they would have an easier time doing it. Where a lot of the independents lack is the strategy, is the infrastructure, kind of that planning. They do a lot more in this quarter, and when something like a pandemic like this comes, you're left vulnerable.
Yep. So we're wrapped up here, but from our standpoint, thank you again for hearing our story and working with our clients and what we've been able to do in the last couple of months in managing the COVID-19 pandemic. These are the key takeaways we hope you can kind of take with you after hearing us talk and hearing about how Response Labs works. Number one, the core tenets of CRM remain true across industries and states of business. It really doesn't matter what's going on. As I mentioned earlier, if you're going to invest the time and the money as a business in the data of your customers and you're using it well, and you're getting the messaging to them that's appropriate for where they are, when they are, it's always going to matter. And you're always going to be a leg up and a step up above your competition. In particular, the digital CRM programs that we provided, adapting quickly, targeting the messaging, and learning fast, made us and our team successful. And it made, ultimately, more importantly, it helped make our clients and their businesses successful. We certainly were a piece of everything they're doing, but an important piece when it came down to it. We are the last step in communicating to customers. With over millions of customers as a whole, it's very important, and we recognize that, and we again made sure we leaned into that and made sure our clients were positioned well for that. And then lastly, as an agency, if you're an agency, advertising agency, marketing agency, or you're on the brand side and you're in charge of digital marketing, CRM, loyalty, if you're B2B and you're doing sales and you're trying to manage your way through this pandemic, CRM made us successful as well, our own CRM. We've spent a lot of time building relationships with our clients, and that relationship building led to them trusting us. It leads to them trusting us, continuing to trust us. We've always viewed ourselves as partners with our client. Very rarely are we ever order takers. In fact, hardly ever. When we started Response Labs, that was a key part of our philosophy in setting up the company, is we were not going to be a team of order takers just executing things. We were going to push back when it needed to be pushed back. We were going to say the things that need to be said, and we were going to work with the partners that wanted to work with us and wanted to work in CRM the way that we believed it needed to be positioned. And we're doing that. And that really led to stronger relationships. Reliance on data-informed decision-making. We're at a time in our country where trusting science is questioned. It's good to question things on a whole, but there are certain things that you want to truly embrace and rely on and lean on. And data-informed decision-making and scientific-informed decision-making is really key at a huge pandemic level in terms of health and safety, but also in your everyday marketing. The more that you can lean on data information, and we make sure we say data-informed less than we say data-driven, it still requires human thought, human intervention, and the experience you have as to what ultimately gets executed. So you've got to take the data, you got to use that to inform the decision you have to make, but it still takes experience and expertise to actually take it that last 10%. Belief in constantly testing and learning. We try really hard to test as much as we possibly can. It doesn't always, not every communication, will allow for that type of testing, but where we can, especially with Outback, where we're brought in as that consultative email marketing partner, testing is huge. And then lastly, the ability to think quick and adapt to changing times. It again made us successful with where we are. So thank you, everybody. If you want to, I don't know if you're able to speak, but if you want to ask any questions, and I'll let Dan sort of wrap things up here. But we can use the chat here to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, we've got about 5 minutes. Andy, thank you for that. You covered an awful lot of ground in a short period of time. What questions do you have about how we approached it for either client or higher level? Technology, yep. CRM, any of that type of stuff. If you can type in what your question is into the chat, I can verbalize it here.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Tim. We're also going to be in the Response Lab booth. We have a virtual booth set up. So Dan and I will be over there right after this presentation, and then we'll be in and out throughout the day. But our contact information's there as well. But any questions? Thanks, Amy. I think we answered them all. I think we hit everything. We've said it all.
Well, Nick had Nick. Yeah, he's got a good question. Will you be talking more about RFM at a later November 10th date? Yes, the AMA is having us talk about the RFM work that we did with Outback Steakhouse. That's going to be led by Jen Aldinger, our Director of Client Service, along with Danielle Vona, the CMO at Outback Steakhouse. We're going to go in depth there. That's going to be, I don't know if it's an hour and a half. It's at least an hour and a half. And if you're into RFM, visit the Response Labs website. We have a blog under the Insights tag where we've written pretty extensively about RFM and how we're using that especially during COVID for our clients. So there's great stuff there.
Stephen asked a question about too many emails. That's a great question. It's one we actually we talk about a lot, especially with the grocery client. There's a couple ways to look at it. Yes, there is something as too many emails. Our perspective on it, though, is if the message is right and the customer is engaging with the email, then you keep going with it. And what we do is we monitor unsubscribes, we monitor engagement to determine where is that threshold for communication. So, for example, you might, Amazon's one, I might get 2 to 3, 4 different emails from Amazon in a day, but they're all relevant. They're all targeted to me. They're specific to what I want. If I'm just getting promotional stuff, yeah, that type of stuff can be too much. So we work very closely with our clients to determine what is enough and what is too much, and a lot of it leans on targeting, engagement, and monitoring that data. It's a great question. All right.
Looks like that's it.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. We really appreciate it. We'll be in the booth, and have a great day and good luck. And please attend all the other sessions and support the other presenters here today, and support the ETC and Baltimore and business and all the things that need to be supported. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.